Hey, and welcome back to the Wrestling Audience podcast. Hope everybody is doing well out there as always. Before we get started here, obviously out of the cricket world today. So just before we get onto the wrestling, I just wanted to take a moment to remember the late great Shane Warne. Unfortunately, he's died of a suspected heart attack earlier today at the age of 52, which obviously is far too young. I'm sure we're both fans of cricket, and I'm sure we both have great memories of Shane Warne as a player. I just wanted to acknowledge that really before we get started.
Yeah, rest in peace, the great Shane Warne. Really enjoyed watching him play cricket over the years, and as a personality after retirement, he's gone far too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were saying just before we came on air, I mean, as an English fan, obviously there's always been a bit of a love-hate relationship with Warney over the years. I mean, he's, got a lot of our best batsmen out, made them look a little bit foolish in the process. But yeah, obviously there's tremendous respect for him just across the cricketing world, and won't be forgotten anytime soon.
Indeed.
Today we're looking ahead to the weekend's AEW Revolution show. We've had our choice words to say about AEW over the years. Anyone who's listened to our earlier videos will know that when the company first came out, we were not the biggest fan, shall we say, of some of the stuff they were putting out. Has definitely been some improvements, mainly in terms of personnel. They've brought in some really big names, credible names with that sort of wrestling knowledge and integrity, and it's definitely, I would say, elevated the product overall. Although there are still some glaring issues with the AEW product. Would that be the same for you? Your sort of current opinions on the product?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's a very fair assessment. And on top of that, they don't tease you with the return of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Cody Rhodes and fail to deliver. So they have a lot more of my goodwill right off the bat.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. I guess if you were using wrestling terminology, I think AEW, they still kind of come across as the baby faces with WWE as the heels. I don't know if
Absolutely.
that's still the case, but yeah. There's definitely some big matches coming up. I must admit, again, just with other stuff going on in my life, I haven't been watching or following AEW religiously, although I've been watching certainly some feuds with close interest, one of them being the Punk and MJF stuff, which I'm sure we'll get on to talk about in a moment. But just looking at the card, on paper, there's some matches here that really sort of spring out to me. Is it the same for you? Anything in particular that you're looking forward to before we sort of get into the detail of it?
I mean, I think it's hard to look past uh, the CM Punk and MJF feud. And I think that's one of the best rivalries we've had in pro wrestling over the last few years. And I don't think I've enjoyed any pro wrestling rivalries more than this one in quite some time. It's terrific stuff from two really talented guys, and yeah, I mean, you have to check out what these guys are doing every week. Really, it's pretty compelling.
Absolutely. It's so often the case in wrestling when you get two people put together in a feud, and there's such high expectations for it. And with this one, there were definitely high expectations. People know what CM Punk's all about, obviously, and MJF is one of, if not the most sort of promising stars coming out of wrestling at the moment, and we expected something pretty good, and I think it's fair to say that they've surpassed our expectations, or they've certainly surpassed mine anyway. Some really, really good, obviously, promo work, but just sort of the nuances and the layers involved in the feud have been really, really compelling as well. And yeah, I mean, definitely, really, really looking forward to this match after the, sort of the recent events on the last few episodes of Dynamite. Although you were mentioning that despite how much you are enjoying the feud, there were a few sort of niggles you had with the maybe sort of the most recent segment, was it?
Yeah, Dan. So on last week's episode of Dynamite, I mean the one prior to the Go Home show, MJF cut this incredible promo. Like he's touching on his backstory and everything. It's sort of like when you give a villain a sympathetic backstory and then you make them this sort of multifaceted character where you sort of hate them, but you have some sympathy for them along the way. And on this episode of Dynamite, Punk attempts to reconcile with MJF. MJF hits him with a low blow. Great assault. They have FTR stopping the security guards from making their way to the ring. Get color on Punk. All of it tremendous, really great stuff. But then MJF picks up the mic and he says, "I'm the devil. You shouldn't have believed me. I played you the whole time, etc., etc." And in a way, he sort of rendered last week's promo irrelevant. I would have preferred if he sort of harkened back to last week's promo and he touched on why Punk drove him to this point and his hatred for Punk, and how Punk failed to rescue him from a tortured childhood and so on and so forth. But instead of making him this interesting multi-layered character, they sort of opted to dial back to cookie cutter heel.
Yeah, I agree with you. To a certain extent. I mean, because I guess I was worried that they were going to go too far down the line of just this is one big kind of gotcha moment, and MJF was going to just turn around and start doing that sort of maniacal heel laugh that we're so used to seeing from heels predominantly in WWE. And I guess I agree that maybe it did take it a little bit away from the previous week's promo, but I didn't think it did it too much. I mean, they've still left a little bit of room open there for what MJF disclosed to everybody the previous week to be the case and still be true. It's just that maybe like he was sort of like rejecting Punk's sort of advances and sort of sort of comfort and understanding, and it sort of just triggered him back into being that sort of maniacal villain again. So I don't know, maybe it's just different ways of seeing it, but I didn't think it ruined it too much, although maybe they could have done it slightly better with what he said on the mic at the end. But definitely glad that they didn't go down the really easy WWE route of ha ha ha, I've got you, I was only joking, and making it all up the previous week. So yeah, I don't know, I didn't think they ruined it too much, but yeah.
No, I mean, I'll still watch the match and everything, but it's it's a pretty annoying lack of attention to detail.
Yeah, which I guess so everything pretty much in this feud so far has been it hasn't slipped on any of the detail. It's actually been really well thought out and like I say, very compelling. But yeah, it's an interesting point there that you've made. I didn't really consider that too much before you raised it. Again, maybe it could have been done better, but it definitely could have been done a lot worse as well.
And considering that it's AEW, you sort of almost go into it expecting them to do a lot worse, perhaps.
Yeah. I just one thing I did want to say actually is just a bit of a nod towards Bray Wyatt, or Wyndham Rotunda, I think his name is. So his many attempts to try and give his characters these elaborate backstories, but then someone like MJF comes along and just tells an everyday story about somebody who suffers with a condition that lots of people around the world suffer from, and everybody's instantly captivated by it. So again, you don't need to be this maniacal monster or sort of swamp villain to be compelling. You just need to be a human being. Really. Yeah.
Who would have thought?
So I think one other thing that this promo did, well, this segment did, I think, was that it sort of justified the the gimmick for the match, the dog collar match. Because this is again something that they could have just easily thrown out there and said, "Yeah, we're just going to have a dog collar match," as if they'd sort of picked it out of a hat. But given the last couple of weeks, I mean, and I must admit, actually, like when I was watching the promo on Wednesday, it was the first time in a long time where I've kind of been taken in by the story to the point where I'm like, actually, wow, that's a really shitty thing to do. And I had this sort of like genuine level of sympathy for CM Punk just for a moment before I sort of remembered where I was. And I mean, I definitely can't remember the last time wrestling did that for me. So yeah, it was at that sort of moment I was thinking, CM Punk needs to kick this guy's ass, and he needs to do it in a pretty sort of vicious way. And the fact that it's a dog collar match, it's going to be obviously bloody and gruesome and everything. So I think it really justifies what they're doing. So yeah, that's definitely another plus for me.
And because usually when you watch pro wrestling, the only person you have sympathy for is you, because you actually sat through the. But anyway.
Exactly.
Well, that's pretty much how I felt for the last 2 years watching AEW, well, most of AEW anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose before Punk and Danielson got there.
Exactly. I mean, the other thing, or the other sort of side story going on with this feud is obviously the MJF and Wardlow stuff. Do you think it has gone on too long now? Like, are you just waiting for Wardlow's face turn to come, or is it just because we're so sort of programmed to accept short-term storytelling from both AEW and WWE that it just feels a bit sort of out of place?
I think again, I mean, there's been like a little bit of back and forth, right? Because MJF cost Wardlow like his crowning moment in a sense when Wardlow had Punk beat with the Powerbomb Symphony, but Wardlow still handed MJF the assist in his first match against Punk in Chicago. So yeah, Dan, you're right. Maybe they sort of missed a trick here in the sense that like you can only keep teasing this for so long before people stop caring about it altogether, right? There's got to be some semblance of striking while the iron is hot.
Yeah, I guess the main thing really that's maybe held them back a little bit is just trying to get Wardlow as over as he can be with the audience, because he's still aligned with MJF, so we're still doing a lot of heelish things. But I'm guessing the goal is to turn Wardlow face when he does turn on MJF. So you want to know that the crowd are going to be behind him. And I guess that this whole Powerbomb Symphony thing is really helping with that. He's starting to engage a little bit more with the audience. He's not just a big heavy guy. Some of his personality, I think, is starting to come out a little bit. I mean, this isn't Dave Bautista and Triple H, but it's sort of like a 2022 version of that.
Yeah, I mean that's the closest comparison, right? Like in terms of the not just the relationship, but also the fact that they're going for the slow build.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, because again, I think it probably has gone on a little bit too long, and it probably is time to strike with this. But I wouldn't really want any involvement from Wardlow in the dog collar match, mainly because I think the feud doesn't need it. This match just needs to be, its own thing on its, with its own merit. And also, I think MJF really needs to come away with the win here. I know it would kind of go against what you would logically expect, but well, I don't know. Unless they're having like the third rubber match. I mean, if Punk gets the win here, then they do a third match, and MJF, like, he needs to come out of this feud ultimately the winner. And I think Punk is somebody who understands that. I don't think he'd be looking to take any limelight away from MJF, really.
Yeah, I think it's too soon to have Punk lose a feud. I think you need to have him, you know, run with the belt for a little while before, before losing. But I could see that happening for sure. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out.
Do you see Punk getting his hands on the world title before MJF does?
I think so, Dan. Don't you?
Um, I don't know. I mean, because again, talking about striking while the iron's hot. I mean, is MJF like after this feud? If he comes away from it, and especially if he beats CM Punk, twice in a row, there's probably not going to be a better time for him to get his hands on the world title. Again, there's always the danger that you kind of overshoot it and you don't give it to him in the next few months, and I don't know, somebody else comes along that takes the audience's attention away from MJF. And I don't know, but I would like to see him as champion, pretty soon. Whereas I think Punk you could keep, on the back burner. His name just carries him through, and I think that eventually at some point it'll be fun to do that with him. But no, I think it's MJF's time personally.
That's fair enough, really. I mean, yeah, I mean, you could absolutely make the argument for MJF. Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, I can't get it out of my crow that CM Punk should probably or that I expect CM Punk to win. But let's see how it plays out.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, just briefly touching on obviously the actual championship match itself on Sunday. I mean, I think an MJF and Hangman Page feud would work just in the short term, because I think Hangman Page would be a great person for MJF to take the title away from, because Hangman Page is still relatively popular with the audience, and he's doing this whole kind of anxious millennial cowboy thing, and that's just so much cannon fodder for MJF to utilize against him. So I think that would be a great feud in itself. And I think you could tell it a little bit longer as well, with Page trying to get the title back from MJF. It doesn't need to be a one match feud. It could be maybe like a multi match feud or whatever. So yeah, for like at least for me anyway, I think that's where they really need to be going with this. But I might be wrong.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think he would play really well off Hangman Page. You're right about that. I completely agree.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, because obviously we talk a lot about obviously how much of a shame it is for this generation to be watching wrestling, not knowing how good it could be, and we always talk about the those sort of standout stars from this generation are very few and far between. But at least you've got MJF. I mean, I don't know, because everybody obviously does this naturally, and there's somebody who becomes popular at this time, and you think, what would he have been like in the Attitude Era, or in previous eras of wrestling? I mean, do you think MJF would have fitted in okay with the Attitude Era or the Hogan Era or like the Territories? Or?
Oh yeah, he's such a talent that I think he would have done really well in any era of wrestling. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that maybe the only thing that would have held him back in the sort of Rock and Austin days was his look, maybe, because his mic skills speak for themselves, but he's still relatively small compared to those guys.
But as they say, the cream eventually rises to the top.
Yep, no, absolutely, yeah. And I do appreciate the fact that the AEW have sort of held back a little bit. I mean, again, it would have been very tempting just to give him the title because he's such a talent. But and I know he had that little feud with John Moxley last year or the year before, but they haven't thrown everything at the wall and everything, so there's still a lot of stuff to look forward to with him going forward, and that's again something you don't really see these days with wrestling.
I'm pleasantly surprised that AEW managed to see the star power in him, because he's not your AEW type of wrestler, Dan, if you know what I mean. There aren't too many flips. He certainly doesn't own a trapeze. He's never aspired to work in a circus. I could go on and on.
Yeah, and he's never wrestled 50-minute matches in Japan, so
absolutely. I mean, that at one point that seemed to be like the most basic criteria. You needed to work 50-minute matches with blow-up dolls in Japan. But I suppose you sort of have to give AEW credit because they're not the promotion that's teasing you. Steve Austin matches are not delivering them. So.
You got a real bee in your bonnet about this, haven't you?
I was so annoyed. No, Dan, no, just before we sort of move away from this topic, these guys have to close out the show, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know. They should, because I think it would be really hard for anyone to try and follow this. But